The moment her fingers brushed the corroded metal of the old war tank, a loud gasp cut through the quiet museum hall. It came from across the room. A man had gone pale, knees buckling beneath him, his body folding like paper. He hit the floor. Before anyone could catch him. At first, people thought he had fainted from the heat. The museum was crowded that day, filled with tourists and students. But as the whispers rose and people stepped back, the truth began to unfold, not from his mouth, but from the insignia on his faded jacket. The man on the floor wasn't a stranger. He was a veteran, one who hadn't spoken about the war in decades, not even to his own children. His name was Sergeant Raymond Price, 76 years old. He had come to the museum alone, quietly, like he did every year on the same date. July 12th. Emma was the girl who touched the tank. She didn't mean any harm. She was only 12 and curious, running her hand along the cool, rough steel of a relic from a war she'd only read about. But something in that moment pierced through decades of silence and buried memories. And Sergeant Price, who had held it all in for so long, collapsed under the weight of a memory too heavy to carry any longer. Emma backed away, her eyes wide, her hand trembling as if the metal had burned her. A staff member rushed to help, but the veteran waved him off. Slowly, painfully, he rose to one knee, then to his feet, one hand resting on the tank's tread like a soldier finding balance on an old battlefield. He didn't speak. He just stared at the tank, not seeing the museum walls anymore, but something far older, something far louder. In 1969, Sergeant Raymond Price was a 20-year-old tank commander in the jungles of Vietnam. His crew, 5 men from 5 different states, had once sat inside that very machine. He could still hear their laughter, could still smell the oil and sweat and gunpowder. The tank wasn't just a display, it was a tomb. 3 of his men had died in it during an ambush that left the forest in flames and the sky bleeding ash. Raymond had survived. He'd been pulled from the burning wreckage, his skin scorched, his legs shattered. But the real damage was invisible, etched into the silence he had carried home. No one in the museum knew any of this. To them, he was just an old man. To the guards near the entrance, he was the guy who'd refused to pay the interactive tour fee because he said he didn't need someone to explain history he had lived. He had been turned away from the guided group, told, "You can look, but don't touch," as if his hands hadn't once guided that very tank through chaos. When Emma touched the tank, she unknowingly broke the last barrier. Her innocent hand unlocked something buried deep in him. And the collapse wasn't weakness, it was release. People stared, unsure of what to do. The room was thick with silence. One man near the back snickered. Guess the old war stories finally caught up with him. But then, a janitor stepped forward. Quietly, deliberately. He wore a plain blue uniform, but on his wrist, just barely visible beneath the cuff, was a Marine tattoo. He didn't say a word. He just walked to Sergeant Price and stood beside him, placing one hand on the tank. Then a woman in a wheelchair rolled forward, her coat pinned with medals she hadn't earned, but that had belonged to her late husband. She placed a white carnation on the tread point one by one. Others followed. In less than a minute, the museum transformed from a place of quiet observation into a sanctuary of silent respect. No announcements, no applause, just a sea of hands touching the steel, not out of curiosity, but reverence. Sergeant Price finally spoke, his voice dry, cracked, but unwavering. Some things don't belong behind glass. Some things remember. His words echoed, not just through the room, but through the hearts of everyone present. And then the museum's youngest guide, no older than Emma, stepped up to the plaque beside the tank and wrote something new beneath the printed description. This tank was touched by war. So was he. A week later, the museum unveiled a new exhibit beside the tank. A photo of Sergeant Price in uniform, standing tall beside the machine that once carried both his courage and his ghosts. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought in silence, and the strongest soldiers carry their wounds where no one can see. If this story moved you, comment below with where you're watching from, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that silent heroes walk among us every day. Subscribe for more stories that honor courage, kindness, and the quiet strength that changes everything.